So good afternoon everyone. My name is Maurya Hanspal, and in this session we're going to continue our sessions on blockchain and cryptocurrencies. So in the previous session we talked about the concept of blockchain, and we're going to take forward the concept of blockchain here. Okay. So I talked about, see, let's do it manually once again for a clear understanding. You have these separate blocks that have been formed, right? These separate blocks have been formed. Block 1, block 2, 3, 4. And these have been linked through a chain. And obviously this one will have a 0 1 and a new hash is created. See, the hash is created as 1 2 3 4. So this should be same here as 1 2 3 4. And with this help a new hash would be created as A B C D. Now this must be same here as A B C D, and here like new would be created X Y Z. Now this must be same as X Y Z here, and a new would be created here as hash at the rate exclamation, right? So you need to see this must match with this with this, and this with this. If this is matching, it means it is no tampering and the blockchain is completely fine. Okay. And we talked about the decentralization. Now we'll talk about why it's called a public ledger. Why it's a public ledger? It's called a public ledger because it is available to everyone and everyone can view it. Viewing it, it does not mean that you can see the name of the person. Okay. Because they gave you a very basic example today only at the end of the previous session. When you email someone, your username is the public key where everyone can see your name, and your password is the private key. But in case of the blockchain network, like for example, if I am sending my cryptos or like something else to a second party, then my name won't be visible as morehanspal@yahoo.com. Okay, it would be as hash 1234. And these kinds of functions would be attached, like every person would have a different type of this encrypted name. Okay, and these encrypted names are available to everyone publicly, and I'll show you as well in a live demo in the subsequent sessions. Okay, so that's why it's called a public ledger, because these are available to everyone and everyone can view that public name, which is a form of the encrypted message, okay, on the public ledger. Okay, and that's why it's called a public ledger, because everyone can view it in the blockchain, because they ultimately have to match it ना कि same है नहीं है. अगर सेम नहीं है मतलब like someone else has entered. Say like for example, if a person had this as the hash function, and if instead of this 1 2 3 4 it changes to 1 3 4 2, it means some other person tried to enter in between and he has entered in between. Because अगर मैंने अपना सामान किसी एक person को बेचा है, okay, तो this must be common because ultimately I have sold it to him. ठीक है, अब अगर कोई इंसान बीच में आ जाए तो obviously like this would be changed, right? And that is the main logic of the blockchain. You need to do it. And who is doing all this? कि मतलब सब कुछ match हो रहा है, because if we see it and if we find out that something wrong is happening or some kind of manipulation is happening, or maybe these functions are not matching, then what can we do? We cannot go to court, we cannot go to RBI, because these are unregulated. Till now, still it is unregulated, though the taxation has been imposed, but that does not mean that now it is regulated. Though it's a good concern, it's a matter that we can say it can be regulated in future. But till now, nor the RBI nor the finance minister have accepted the fact that these are regulated. They've just imposed a taxation. And imposing a taxation on something does not mean it is illegal. Even taxation is imposed on gambling as well, and gambling is included as a part of the other income, right? Which is illegal in like some of the states, but in some states it's legal, right? So similarly, the matter of the cryptocurrency, these technologies, NFTs are still in a gray area. That neither white as legal or neither black as illegal, right? So that is something different. But you still cannot complain to anyone. So who is managing all these transactions? A person in between. There is a person in between who is managing all these transactions and is consistently rectifying that these functions are matching. And this function is not, this person is not a single person, a group of persons are here, like between each of these blocks. इस ब्लॉक को वेरीफाई करेंगे ये दोनों कि यहाँ पे सब कुछ मैच हो रहा है या नहीं. फिर ये बंदे यहाँ पे आएंगे, वो इसको देखेंगे कि यहाँ पे सब मैच हो रहा है या नहीं. Then these person will come in here and they will say कि मैच हो रहा है या नहीं. Right? And these persons are called your minors. These persons are called minors. And this process, like where they are kind of rectifying or kind of managing that everything is going by favor, this process is called mining. These people are minor and the process is called mining. Okay. So that is something you need to know about. अब ये लोग जो माइनिंग कर रहे हैं ऑब्वियसली फ्री में तो करेंगे नहीं. They would obviously want something, and for that they get a reward, and the reward is the form of bitcoins. And these, as the mining, every year it gets halved. अभी 6.25 चल रहा है, ठीक है. पहले लाइक 12.5 था, उससे पहले 25 था, तो इट्स गेटिंग हाफ. अब 6.25 है तो नेक्स्ट में 3.125 हो जाएगा, फिर 3.125 का हो जाएगा हाफ, राइट. 1.50012 समथिंग हो जाएगा, right? So it gets halved. Why? Because the bitcoins are limited. Bitcoins are limited. They have a supply only for 21 million, that's it. And 21 million is 21 lakhs. They just have a supply of like 21 lakhs. So that was the, like when you talk about like 1 million, okay, 1 million is equals to 10 lakhs. So your 21 million will be 2 crore 10 lakhs, right? 21 million into 1 lakh. Right? So that is one thing we need to know. So only 2 crore 1 lakh bitcoins are available. So obviously the supply is limited, and that's why the bitcoin also command a price. So these people get a bitcoin for the services that they provide as a proof of work. This is a proof of work because it is a proof of work that they're doing it. They're managing this blockchain network. They are like verifying these transactions, and as a proof of work, they get a reward. Okay, so that is one thing that must be known. They get a proof of work. For the proof of work, they get a reward. Okay. Now, what is the problem with the proof of work? The problem with the proof of work is all these miners who are involved between these blocks, or who are trying to like rectify these transactions, or trying to verify these transactions that whether everything is right or wrong. Okay, they are like verifying these transactions in between. Okay. These persons, they need to have a computer or a system with high computing power, because the mining process, it takes away a huge or like consumes huge amount of energy. बहुत energy consume करते हैं. Okay, only the people who can afford to have such a computers or afford to use such electricity can use it. Okay. So अब यहाँ पे क्या होता है ना, people try to create their mining pools. A mining pool क्या होता है? All those powerful people who can control this network, who have this high computing power, who have bitcoins, they can control this mining pool by creating a cartel, as we see in case of the oil companies OPEC. Because like this is something which is controlling the price of oil. अब वो सप्लाई ज्यादा करेंगे तो प्राइस कम हो जाएगा, अब वो सप्लाई कम करेंगे तो प्राइस ज्यादा हो जाएगा. Similarly, these people who have high computing power, who have money, who have time and effort, they can manipulate this blockchain also for their own benefit. Because यहाँ पे like they'll form a cartel, because they'll say like we are the most powerful person, we have the computing power, and all those persons who have a less computing power, they won't be allowed to do so. That's a proof of work में ये होती problem, and that's a drawback for the proof of work. So to avoid this drawback of the proof of work, a new concept called a proof of stake was introduced. Proof of stake. This proof of stake was introduced. So proof of stake is something, the person who would have the maximum bitcoins, or a person on a random basis would be allowed to mine these transactions. And what in return that person would have to do? He would have to stake his coins. वो काम मान लो अगर 2% कर रहा है, उसे stake 5% करने पड़ेंगे, and stake ज्यादा क्यों करने पड़ेंगे? Just in case he tries to manipulate the chain. tries to tamper this blockchain network, these coins would be lost at, and like he won't get these coins. And अगर काम करेगा अच्छे से तो 5% तो मिलेगा, उसके अलावा 5% के अलावा भी और मिलेगा इंटरेस्ट के साथ. So that's a better way in which a monopoly is not created, or like there is no cartelization between these people. Okay, that's a proof of stake. Nowadays, in case of some cryptocurrencies like Solana and all, a concept called proof of history has also come in. The proof of history is not being widely used because most of the cryptocurrencies or the blockchain network, they work on the proof of work and the proof of stake only. But to tell you in very brief, your proof of history is something which will keep a record of the history of all the transactions on the blockchain network. Of all the transactions, जब तुम 20 साल बाद, 40 साल बाद, 100 साल बाद अगर तुम चेक करना चाहोगे हिस्ट्री, so those transactions would be available for verification. Okay, so that's your proof of history. Okay. So this was the concept of blockchain. Exactly, blockchain होता क्या है? A decentralized system, a public ledger, proof of work, proof of stake, proof of history. And ये जो blocks हैं, we also call it as a peer-to-peer network. And why do we call it as a peer-to-peer network? We call it as a peer-to-peer network because obviously persons are involved into this. Peer-to-peer, they are transacting with each other, or transactions हो रही हैं, right? That's what's called a peer-to-peer network. Okay. So one thing that you need to see, like still see after mining or after like verification or like matching these hash keys and all, still scams are done. Still these blockchains are tampered. Okay, why? Because if a technology, okay, is something into the field and if people are like using it and become habitual to it, because earlier people were not habitual using these technologies. But now if they become habitual, hackers also become habitual. They learn, they try to like breach into the system and they try to find the loopholes and steal your cryptos. Okay, so again for that, like some wallets have been created, like MetaMask and various others. Okay, in which you can store your currencies in an offline way and that won't be available on the network of the blockchain. Okay, so that is something different. But still see, when these hackers hack, because a large number of hacking has been done for those purposes also, that was an ethical hacking. Because all those hackers who stole the money, they returned the money to the blockchain network back. Because they said that we were just trying to penetrate your system, or we were just trying to test your system, whether it is working or not. Like whether it is working as per everything correctly or not. Right? So they started to like return those also. But still the chains are being tampered. And every time the chain gets tampered, some new measures come in. Okay. And these new currencies or like these new kinds of blockchains or improvement of the blockchain that are coming up in the market, or new types of cryptocurrencies that are coming up in the market, the main purpose is to suggest an improvement over the previous ones. Because जो भी new market में आता है एक same चीज में, that suggests an improvement over the previous ones. Okay, because not like randomly like things would come in, right? Everything would be as an improvement. Okay, so that is the main essence why these new blockchains and like cryptocurrency types of things comes into place. So when we talk about further, see, blockchain is only, people say that blockchain is used only for the purpose of the cryptocurrencies, but that is not. They can be used for a large number of stuffs. From the purpose of education to voting to foreign fund transfer, payments, smart contracts, crowdfunding, election. Okay, so all these things we'll talk about in the next session when we talk about the uses of